Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full time and have a collection of hundreds of monster ecology and strategy videos on my channel. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing as I upload at least twice a week. I am faced with a tricky situation with the Loxodon race found in the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, because although the Loxodon has been a part of the Magic the Gathering collectible card game lore for a while, they were a part of the Mirran set and the story of its transformation and have found a new home for themselves in the city world of Ravnica, mainly in the ranks of the Celestia Guild. The Loxo, a very similar race, have long been a part of the Forgotten Realms lore, even longer than Magic the Gathering. So let's take a closer look at what we know about the Loxo and the Loxodons, because they are very similar at first glance, but as soon as you delve deeper into their lore and their cultures, you quickly realise that these are two very different races. In this video, I'll talk about both races, their similarities and differences, and at the end, offer some ideas that you could explore with them in your games. The obvious and immediate difference between the two races is their trunk and their hands. The Loxo have two trunks, side by side on their head. The Loxodon have one trunk. The Loxo have very short and stubby fingers compared to the more human-like fingers of the Loxodon. They are of very similar height and weight, about the only difference is that the Loxo have a bluish grey skin tone, while the Loxodon have a more of a pinkish grey. Loxo and Loxodons also differ in their fundamental outlook on life. While the Loxo stay with their own kind and view extremes in life to be always detrimental, favouring balance in all things, and saw all their actions in terms of the benefit or detriment to the survival of their herd, the Loxodons have a very stark and black and white view of reality and spirituality. They are extremely single-minded and see nothing wrong with administering justice to others, either in physical punishment or forcing others into acts of atonement, or both. While both races seem pretty serene, this is actually a huge difference between them. So the Loxo are culturally of a true neutral alignment, and the Loxodon are culturally of a lawful alignment, and this can cause big problems between them. But first, let's examine the Loxodon in more detail. They average at over 7 feet in height, have 3 fingers and a thumb on each hand. They tend to appear cool, calm and collected, very sure of themselves, very dedicated to their cause, very loyal and somewhat fearless. Loxodons hum or chant in sonorous tones and move slowly or sit in perfect stillness, but when active and fully motivated, they bellow and flap their ears, use their large size to smash through barriers and hurl smaller folks around, crash furniture and generally Hulk smash the place. The Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica says that the Loxodons believe that the members of a group have a responsibility to look out for each other. Once they have joined a guild or bonded with other individuals in any capacity, Loxodons devote themselves to maintaining that bond. They coordinate their efforts and are often willing to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the group. They expect reciprocal loyalty and commitment from other members of the community and can be severe in their disappointment when their trust is betrayed. This is essentially the devotion to the herd, but for them, it takes on a heavy sense of obligation and personal responsibility. They see it as their primary purpose. The main difference between them and the Loxo is that the Loxodon is more flexible in what they consider to be their herd. For instance, those Loxodons of Ravnica may consider the guild to be their herd, even to the point that it becomes more important to them than their relationship with their own family, something a Loxo would see as deeply wrong. Loxodons also differ from the Loxo in having an innate proficiency at stonemasonry, in a similar way to the difference between a dwarf and a human in that regard, to their ability to work with stone. Loxodon skills in stone construction are highly regarded on the world of Ravnica. They are responsible for the amazing cathedrals of the Celestia Conclave, which are arboretums, great big gardens of stone, and that are like a cross between a cathedral and a greenhouse. Across the multiverse, Loxodons were brought to the world of Mirran via Memnarch's soul traps. They adapted to the unique mineral-rich ecosystem there, and the Mirran Loxodons inhabited the region called the Razor Fields. The Mirran Loxodons believed in a code of absolute morality that was taken at face value and passed on from one generation to the next in their rigid legacy of family clan traditions. In arguments, much like the Ravnica Loxodons, they are regarded as stubborn and nearly implacable in their opinions, which once formed were not likely to be changed. The general opinion of the Mirrans was that Loxodons were unable to think in shades of grey and viewed the world only according to their own moralistic absolutes. The Mirran Loxodons travelled the territory of the Razorfields dispensing justice, much like the Ravnica Loxodons. Although the Mirran Loxodons believed that those born among their race who were affected with albinisms were members of a special religious elite gifted with spiritual purity above all others. Eventually, the world of Mirrodin was transformed by the techno-bio-necromancy that was the cult of the New Phyrexia. The machine orthodoxy's invasion of the Razorfields isolated the remaining Loxodon, and those few survivors joined forces with Galma the Shaper, a Loxodon artificer. She is responsible for creating the Razor Circle passages used by survivors in the Razorfields to travel from the Bladehold and access other refugees in the Furnace Layer, as the world is slowly recreated into a topography similar to the original Phyrexia. Not my top pick for a holiday destination by any chance. The atrocities of the war with Phyrexia have tested Loxodon beliefs there, but Loxodons remain crucial allies in the Mirran effort. Loxodon trumpets, much like the non-sentient elephants of other planes, using their voices to signal and communicate with other Loxodons across wide expanses of the Razorfields. When engaging an enemy, the meanings of Loxodon trumpets can be interpreted as direct, plain-spoken challenge, often couched in surprisingly courteous terms. "I disagree strongly with extreme force. I must insist that one of you yield post-haste. Surrender now or I shall slay you and then vigorously trample you." Other Loxodon populations across the Magic the Gathering multiverse include those living in Tarkir, allied with the Timur frontier. These are very different from the Loxodon of other planes, resembling mammoths and being far more chaotic and personal in cultural behaviour. The Loxodons of Ravnica grow up with the traditions and values handed down to them by their family and clan. They accept these teachings as a collection of moral and ethical rules that they call the modest truth. As far as they're concerned, these are absolutes, and trying to debate them with a Loxodon is the very definition of futility. Even so, they regard any challenge as an opportunity to test themselves, prevail, and prove their personal skill. Something that many of them seek out and take up the lifestyle of adventurers. Their plans and strategies towards these challenges can be simplistic at times, as they refuse to consider the finer details of a problem and instead favour a head-on, often brute force approach to succeed in any situation. If faced with a problem, smash the problem and see if that works, and then smash it again just to be sure. They make up for this seemingly simplistic attitude with their elaborate measures of punishment for those who break their rules. First, a ranking soldier or cleric dispenses a physical assault, overwhelming the violator with bodily pain. Then a cleric or confessor hears the penitent's admission of guilt. This process works well among Loxodons, ensuring a strict form of justice and guaranteeing consent on the modest truth, but other races often view it as barbaric, authoritarian and cruel. Loxodons, of course, think everyone else is mistaken. Loxodon spellcasters, both divine and arcane, have a similar attitude in how they direct their magic. They see a problem, they apply direct force, overwhelming power. In physical combat, they are headstrong, tireless, and irrepressibly confident, seeing almost every battle as a challenging opportunity to prove their mettle. Loxodon monks of a high level often take a vow of silence, but unlike other monks, they take their vows of silence so seriously that they impose it on any who enter their presence. Those who fail to conform to this expectation, refer back to their elaborate rules for punishment and atonement. On Ravnica, the primary difference between Loxodons who join different guilds is their sense of the size of the community they belong to. For Loxodons of the Selesnya Conclave, their community is the world and all living beings in it. Kind of Jedi-like. Everything is valuable, meant to live in harmony and interdependent. For Azorius Loxodons, community primarily means the society of different peoples who need adherence to law and order so that they can function together. For those in the Orzhov Syndicate, community means the syndicate alone, with its interests taking priority of those of other groups. I have to say, Azorius Loxodon paladins are the absolute cliche of the infuriating stick-up-their-ass paladins that give the character class a bad name. Loxodons who arrive in the Dungeons and Dragons multiverse will probably worship dwarven gods, and certainly the dwarven gods would find the general attitudes and abilities of the Loxodons to be highly admirable. Okay, so let's take a closer look at the Loxo, who already exist in the Dungeons & Dragons multiverse. Loxos are usually peaceful creatures, but they defend their territories and families with great tenacity. They are among the most dangerous of all desert dwellers to those who incur their wrath. A Loxo appears to be a bipedal elephant, albeit a bit smaller. Its skin is bluish grey, wrinkled and covered with rough, sparse hair. It has stocky limbs and fingers, flat feet and large ears. Its most striking feature is the pair of trunks that grow from its face, framed by large tusks. Each trunk is about 2 feet long and it has 3 finger-like digits at the end. Although in their stats, that would make their trunk a little bit shorter than the Loxodon, which was about 5 feet long, I think. The typical Loxo stands about 7 to 7.5 feet tall and weighs 500 pounds, or 2.1 to 2.2 meters tall and 226 kilograms. The typical Loxo prefers simple, rustic clothing, particularly cuts from cloth patterned with circles and diamonds. They speak their own language. A lot of it is below the frequency that humanoids can hear clearly. They also speak Common. Well, in the area that they live in the Forgotten Realms, it's the Sharan language of southern Faerun. Loxos venerate nature and strength, having a prevalent druidic tradition and a secondary priesthood. Their worship of the druids appears focused on an entity that must be an aspect of Hyatia, a god of giants, but one also of nature, agriculture, hunting and childbirth. Many Loxo clerics worship their vision of Hyatia, while some favour an aspect of Lalanis, also a deity of the giants, for his strength and healing ability. Loxos prefer melee to ranged combat, and they use throwing weapons only when they can't close in with their enemies. If a herd is threatened, the adult male Loxos charge the intruders, while the females move the young to a defensible position. Once the young are secure, the males make a fighting retreat towards the females so that they too can join in the melee as an entire herd. Almost like humanoid elephants, they share the plains of the Shah with humans and others. Loxos are hunter-gatherers that prefer the seclusion that comes with the miles of open terrain and little interaction with other species. They have roamed the plains for some 2 or 3 centuries, claiming to have arrived from another world via mysterious means. Only the Loxos are certain where they came from, and they don't speak about it. Loxo herds are semi-nomadic. They move about grazing and harvesting fruits and nuts from groves of trees that they have planted and return to each year. When they reach a grove or a good area for grazing, they build temporary huts to serve as shelter until it's time to move on. Loxos need massive amounts of grass and other vegetable material to fuel their big bodies. While not eating, these creatures create rustic works of art which they barter for items or tools that they need. Rustic, but beautiful. Loxo herds are divided into clans, and all members of the clan wear the same pattern of clothing. Each herd has a chief called a Loxfitic, or herd lieutenant, who is a ranger typically, and a Tunnock, who has at least a couple of levels of wizard. A Loxo's preferred character class is ranger typically. Loxo rangers choose favoured enemies from those amongst the threats to their territory and their habitats. For example, the Thrycreen would be high on their list. For the sake of simplicity, both the Loxo and Loxodon have the same basic stats as player characters and non-player characters alike. The only difference is that Loxo can use their trunk for tasks that require some manual precision, thanks to the finger-like extensions at each end of each of their trunks. Also, the Loxo have some barbarian ability to fly into a rage, which I would add as an optional racial feat that only the Loxo can acquire anytime they would normally select a feat. So they fly into a rage for a number of rounds equal to their constitution bonus, minimum of 1 round. They gain advantage on all strength checks and saving throws, have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing and slashing damage, can't concentrate on spells, but when they make a melee weapon attack using strength, they double their strength bonus to that damage. So not as formidable as the barbarian rage in the long run, but simple enough to use, I think, and accurately reflects an ability which they've traditionally had as a race. The player character stats for them are as follows. Their constitution score increases by 2, their wisdom score increases by 1. Most Loxodons are lawful, believing in the value of a peaceful, ordered life. They also tend toward good. Most Loxo are neutral. They believe in the value of family and unity and not getting involved in the affairs and troubles of other races. Both races physically mature at the same rate as humans, but they live about 450 years. They highly value the weight of wisdom and experience and are considered young until they reach the age of 60, so the elders and venerated elders in their community are highly respected and make all the decisions. Loxodons stand between 7 and 8 feet tall. Their massive bodies weigh between 300 and 400 pounds, so Loxo rarely stand taller than 7.5 feet, but they are more broad and bulky than the Loxodons. Still, they both count as medium-sized humanoids. However, they count as one size larger when determining their carrying capacity and the weight that they can push, drag or lift, and their base walking speed is still 30 feet. They have an advantage on saving throws against being charmed or frightened, and their thick, leathery skin provides them with a higher armor class when they aren't wearing armor. Even just simple clothing, and their armor class is 12 plus their constitution modifier. If the armor they're wearing is lower than this, use the higher natural armor class, and also don't forget to add the armor class bonus if they also wear a shield. They can grasp things with their trunk, and they can use it as a snorkel. It has a reach of 5 feet, and it can lift a number of pounds equal to 5 times their strength score. They can also use it to do simple tasks like lift, drop, hold, push or pull an object or a creature, open or close a door or a container, grapple someone, and make an unarmed strike. The DM might allow other simple tasks to be added to that list of options. The Loxodon's trunk can't wield weapons or shields or do anything that requires manual precision, such as using tools or magic items or performing the somatic components of a spell. The Loxo trunks are far more dexterous and often can be used for such tasks, although never with the benefit of any dexterity bonus that they might otherwise have. Thanks to their sensitive trunk, Loxodons and Loxos have advantage on wisdom, perception, wisdom survival, and intelligence investigation checks that involve the sense of smell. So, what world did these two races originate from? In both Forgotten Realms and Magic the Gathering lore, the Loxo and Loxodon have a mysterious past. In the case of the Loxo, they arrived several centuries ago on the world of Tyrell via some sort of magical portal, and that is all they will say on the subject. They never talk about where they came from and have made themselves at home in the south, roaming the grasslands of the Shah, trading with but keeping their distance from the humans of Helruin, Sharan, Durpari, and Archaean cultures, defending themselves from Thrycreen hunters and other exotic creatures of their new homeland, but it seems have absolutely no interest in returning or even visiting where they came from. In fact, the study of magic is fairly rare among members of the clans that constitute their herds, apart from the occasional wizard among their ranks. Come to think of it, those more mastodon-like Loxodons from the Magic the Gathering multiverse might have a Forgotten Realms version as well. If they could be found in the far north of the continent, beyond the spine of the world mountain range, they could be living within the ancient ruins of the old giant empire of Astoria. And maybe the two races arrived together on the world through a magical portal, perhaps created by the giants of Astoria very long ago, who knows. Contending with the far more numerous grey mountain orcs and that call that territory their homeland, the Loxodon mammoth men may often join forces with the stalwart alpine furbolg people who kick a lot more ass than you might expect. Loxodons also don't talk about the world they originated on, and they also arrived on different worlds by means of magical portals and the actions of powerful planeswalkers. Wherever they arrived, they have adapted to and made themselves at home, and it's not too much of a stretch of the imagination to postulate that these two races share the same origin world. And given the stark difference between their mentality and culture, I think they may very well have been at war with each other, or at the very least made up two ethnic groups that would have a pretty strained relationship with each other. I imagine any meeting between a Loxo and a Loxodon, in a role-playing sense, would be quite tense. The situation, particularly as those around them of different races may make the mistake of thinking that they're so similar to each other that they're basically the same, something the Loxo and Loxodon would immediately take some offence at, I think. The difference between them is as plain as the trunk on their face, they might say. There could be a huge amount of history that the two races share that they've never talked about. They come from a world where they've been in conflict with each other for a very long time. They may want absolutely nothing to do with each other, will probably be very suspicious of each other, and be quick to blame, take offence, and never lift a finger to help each other. Essentially, they would be very bigoted towards each other in a way that would highlight how ridiculous this is to the other humanoid races, because they really just can't see such a huge difference between the Loxo and Loxodon until they get to know them a bit better. I mean, what sort of insulting racial slurs would a Loxo and Loxodon sling at each other? How would a dispute between them be resolved by some player characters? If a player character is a self-righteous and holier-than-thou Loxodon cleric or paladin, how do they react when confronted with their taboo and secretive cultural history and a possible legacy of racism and oppression? These are great opportunities for roleplay and a way to explore social topics in a safe atmosphere of a fantasy world, something we could all benefit from and one of the great strengths of role-playing games, I think. I hope that gave you all a pretty good overview of the Loxodon and the Loxos, a bit of inspiration for your campaigns. And hey, if anyone asks what came first, Magic the Gathering Loxodons or Forgotten Realms Loxos, you now know the answer is the Forgotten Realms Loxos. Please hit the like button if you made it this far. Subscribe if you like what I do. Check out my Patreon for exclusive content and all the full scripts for these videos. Buy some merchandise. Wear your geek with pride, and as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.